السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد سيد الأولين والآخرين وحبيب رب العالمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد طب القلوب ودوائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وقوت الأرواح وغذائها وآله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. ربي زدنا علما ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الحمد لله. Welcome back. Day 3. How's everyone feeling? Feeling good? Alhamdulillah. Nice weather. I actually thought today I'd start with something a little bit different. This is something we do typically with our training programs when we have people going through experiential process of healing themselves, of learning about themselves to be providers for other people. We have these kind of landing exercises. We call them landing exercises, which are kind of like body-mind exercises. So you can stay where you are, just get a little bit comfortable if you like. And what I'd like to do, just for a few minutes, is help us reconnect back with ourselves and our bodies in this moment as we begin today's session. You know, maybe the beds weren't so comfortable last night and our necks a little bit tweaked, or maybe the kids were up, or maybe we've been walking more than we were used to walking, or we're a little bit sore, or whatever. Just taking a moment here just to notice the contact between our lower limbs and the floor and the earth. If you like, you can even take your hands and put them on the ground next to you, just to really feel that contact. Notice the texture of the ground, the hardness or the softness, the smoothness or the roughness. There is so much information that's coming in through the body at every moment. Without having to even try, just noticing what you can notice here. Notice your ankles if you're sitting cross-legged. If you're sitting in a different way, just noticing the bottom, maybe your hips, whatever, making contact. Notice that contact. Bring your awareness to your spine. This elongated, bony structure that keeps us upright, physically and maybe even metaphysically. The spine is a very, very important part of our bodies, connecting our hips and our lower limbs to our torso, upper limbs, and our head, our skull sitting on top. With your mind's eye, starting from the bottom of the spine, just bring awareness to every spinal process. Moving from the lower spine to the mid-spine, mid-spine to the cervical spine, and then your head on top. This is our body, this is our jism. How often do we bring awareness to it? Do we connect with it? As modern people, not very much probably. And so how can we care for something that we're not connected to? Bring your awareness to any tensions in the body. We carry so much tension in our muscles, in our joints. So just noticing, without having to change anything about it just yet, just noticing, where are you carrying the tension right now? You're carrying it in your jaw, you're carrying it in your arms and shoulders, you're carrying it in your belly, in your back muscles, your neck muscles are cranked. Where's the tension? Notice your breath. This vital process of life, the in-breath and the out-breath, just noticing, not having to change anything, just as if, just noticing what it feels like to take a breath in and a breath out. Notice how long you hold it. Notice its depth, its frequency. Again, part of that disconnection with the body is our disconnection with proper breathing. We don't actually know how to breathe properly anymore. We unlearn how to breathe with our bellies, that good, low, deep, diaphragmatic breathing that you see babies do. Babies, infants breathe with their bellies. It's so beautiful. We unlearn that. We learn to breathe with our chest and breathe fast, really shallow, fast breaths, which is a stress response. But right now, just coming back and just noticing, how are you breathing right now? What is your normal default breathing rate and breathing style? Notice any sounds you may be hearing, whether near or far. Any smells you may be smelling. And when you're ready, and do this slowly, with a soft gaze, starting with the ground and moving up, open your eyes and orient to the room and others around you. Feel free to look at the windows or the walls. So from a somatic perspective, this is a somatic connection or meditation exercise. Coming back into the body. Soma means body in Latin. So somatic practices bring us back into the body and explore what's in the way of us being in our bodies. Because this is very much a part of our humanity, very much a part of our baseline, foundational, internal status quo, is that we should be embodied, we should be tapped into our senses. Our senses are a way of knowing ourselves and knowing the world. That's very foundational. Right? There's three sources of knowledge that we have: the senses, reason, and wahi. And we, as a people, as a species, as a creation, have unlearned how to connect with the senses. Like, we're not present. Not in a spiritual way, I'm not talking about that. Though there's a connection between a somatic type of presence and a spiritual presence, no doubt. Because even the language of people that have that presence is a very sensory language. Hudur, they're tasting it. They're tasting the sweetness of presence, right? It's a dhawq. It's tasting. It's a witnessing. It's a perception of the senses. Right? It's a higher state of sensing, but it's a state of sensing nonetheless. So we want to build that capacity in our day-to-day just by dropping into this type of state. Isn't this different than our normal hustle and bustle? Right? This is what I invite people to. As much as possible, and you doing that exercise that we just did, and keep that in your pocket and do that anytime you like. Do that in the car. Maybe keep your eyes open. But when you're driving, before eating, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. But how we eat, really affects the way we eat, even before we eat. How we can pre-digest meals by just sitting with the food and being intentional about it and saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and smelling the food and letting the body kind of experience the food before you even taste it. And that triggers certain types of digestive processes in the body before you even put any morsel of food in your mouth. Right? And that's a sunnah. So it's being connected to these things. It's so important, right? Just being connected to the body, to the senses, to one another. I'm not sure how you guys feel about this, but after lockdown, when I prayed my first Jum'ah prayer in the masjid with the brothers, and I'm like getting snug, and I'm like, yeah, bring it in, man, bring it in. Put your feet on my feet, no problem today. Today that's okay. It felt so good to be connected again, right? Wallahi. We need that. But it starts with connection with ourselves. We have to connect with ourselves in a profound way. And using what we talked about yesterday, about the knowledge of the elements, I hope, inshallah, if you weren't able to do it yesterday, that today you can go outside and actually, pick up some earth and just feel into the earth. And feel what it feels like just to play with it, like just to touch it. If you can bring this presence to it, you will feel something, I promise you. Take your water and look at it. Maybe pour a little bit on the ground. Listen to it. People love water features, right? Because it's soothing to the soul. And then drink, and then notice that sensation of it wetting your palate, and then going down your throat, and then satiating your thirst. Being present with that. My teacher Hakim, he said, if we could take 3 steps with full presence, we would attain knowledge of God. If we really could just drop into a felt sense of what it means to be human and alive, and Allah being Rabb and being intimately connected to us, and taking 3 steps with full consciousness, we would attain what we'd attain. So this is the work. This is that really deep work of coming back to ourselves. I also encourage it before prayer. Before prayer, if you take a moment before prayer, I call it actually a little bit cheeky, forgive me, but I call it forepray. Before prayer, you take a moment, you face the Qibla, right? You're standing and you're about to pray. And before you go into the prayer, before you make the takbir al-ihram, feel your feet on the ground. Feel your clothing on your body. And tap into the felt sense of the emotion, which we didn't do in this exercise. But what's the emotion? What am I bringing right now? Am I tired from a long day? I'm praying Asr after a long day. Am I tired at Fajr as the babies are screaming? Am I excited about the vacation that we're taking, coming to Al-Maqasid? Are we anxious about a new promotion that I have to interview for? Whatever. What's the emotion? Am I sad about something? Am I angry about something? What's the emotion? Connect with it. And then bring that into the prayer. We don't want to bifurcate our sense of self from our relationship with Allah Ta'ala. That's not what Allah wants. Allah wants us in the state that He put us in, and to acknowledge the state that He put us in. Part of why we get stuck in states is that we don't acknowledge Allah as the one that put us in those states. That's what Allah wants. How many times people just surrender? They're trying to get married, they go on the websites, they go this, they go on that. And nothing pans out. And then it's like, Ya Allah, I surrender. I put it all back to you. And then next week they meet somebody. Or next month or whatever. But something just shifts immediately. Because there's a type of surrender to the state. We ask ourselves and one another, كيف الحال? كيف الحال? How is the hal? And what do we normally say? Alhamdulillah. Right? Yeah, Alhamdulillah. Ala kulli hal. For every state. But what's the state? Alhamdulillah, I'm sad, alhamdulillah, I'm pissed off, alhamdulillah, I'm in a state of gratitude. Alhamdulillah, but alhamdulillah for what? What is the actual state? Right? That's really important. Allah wants us to be real. We want to have sidq in our states. Sidq, a genuineness, a connection, a realness. The Sahaba were real. They kept it 100, as they say. They would get angry if they got angry. They would show sadness if there was something to be sad about. I'm reminded of the story of the Prophet ﷺ when he was burying his son Ibrahim, who had passed at 1 year old. And one of the Sahaba, I believe it was Sayyidina Abdurrahman ibn Auf, if I'm not mistaken, saw the Prophet ﷺ in the grave, burying his child in the grave. He's putting his child to rest, and he's weeping. There's tears in his eyes. And the Sahabi goes, Anta ya Rasulullah? Like, you ya Rasulullah? Like, you show emotion, you feel that these things that we feel like us human beings, you're inta ma'rabbak, and you're with Allah Ta'ala. You feel these things like we feel? Kind of like saying, he was surprised, kind of like, what's the state that you're in, that you're presenting? And the Prophet ﷺ says what? Barely the eyes feel sadness, or barely the heart feels sadness, and the eyes tear, but we don't say anything that displeases Allah Ta'ala. And notice here, he named the physical sensation, the teary eyes. He named the emotion, right? He was connected to both of those. And then it was the cognition, it was the words. He didn't say anything that displeased Allah Ta'ala. So he held back on the cognitive, or the semantic. But the somatic and the emotional, he connected with. That's baseline. It's baseline, And what much of psychology now talks about the semantic. Tell me about what happened. Tell me about what happened. And they don't connect back with the somatic reality of what actually happened in the body. And it's still happening in the body. They've inverted it. This is why somatic work is so important, to kind of bring us back to the reality. You should connect with it. Connect with the state. Allah wants you to feel the state. He doesn't want you to just talk about it and try to bypass it. We have to be people of presence. And a lot of time that means being present with pain. That's what people talk about, you see on Instagram. Connect with your body. Connect with the felt sense, this and that. They don't really name it, but like what they're actually talking about is connecting a lot of time with pain, with our grief, with our sadness. It's not easy, but that's the work. As we connect with that, it does shift. As you bring the light of awareness and presence to those states, they shift. And it's a powerful shift. It's a transformative shift. It's a shift that changes the psyche, that heals the hearts, that can heal relationships, that bring us back to Allah, that can expose us to the divine breezes, we can be more receptive to Allah Ta'ala's giving, where when we're disconnected from ourselves and our state, and we haven't really got the point yet of what Allah is trying to get us to feel and see and understand through the state, we're not able to receive that. So we prolong the lesson. Because the whole point is that you feel that, you be with it, you learn the lesson, you see Allah's hand in your life in every moment, and then you keep moving. And Allah changes the scene in your drama, if you will, in the great drama of your life. He'll change the scene. No. So health is health, right? Health is becoming whole again, coming back to ourselves in a real way. And that means coming back to our bodies, coming back to a felt sense of the body and healing, defragmentation, as we mentioned in the first lecture. Right? The world is very fragmenting. Trauma is fragmenting. Our relationships can be really unhealthy. And we have to choose between them and us, and oftentimes, what do we choose? We choose them. We choose the relationship over ourselves, and there's a cost to that. We make it a binary, right, in our relationships. Either I can be well, or I have my relationship with you. And so I choose you. Especially a child. A child doesn't even think like that. A child just intuitively feels, there's some sort of tension between me being me saying or doing something, and the attention or the care of my caregiver, of my parent. And there's a dilemma for them. And so what do? Intuitively, they'll suppress themselves in some way and be the way that you want them to be. And there's a loss of something really important there. That's a type of separation from the self. So we talk about ruh, jism, and nafs, and how they're all interconnected, and how affecting one affects the other, right? And really, it's all just one thing, that there's a unity. Even though we talk about these three levels, there's a unity, right? In the ontology of Bani Adam, and in the study of being, of the human being, we have ruh, jism, nafs. And if you study the way that Allah Ta'ala works in the world, Allah Ta'ala's amr comes from above, right? The higher world, Jabarut, and descends through the angels mediating His command into the Malakut. Right? This is for every moment of your life, every action, every moment of creation. There's an amr. And then coming through the Malakut and into Alim al-Khalq, into the world of creation, and into our bodies, and then it upwells from within. Life comes down, the amr comes down, and then it comes from inwardly out. Yeah? You guys follow? Life, existence, change comes from above, from within, because we have the inner ruh that's in the malakut, into the khalq, which is the outer jism. And that is the linear process of healing. That's why we talk about root causes. We talk about healing the inward soul to heal outward maladies, healing energetically with things like homeopathy and acupuncture and hydrotherapy and so on and so forth. The energetics, because that's the deeper level. You're accessing the deeper point in the chain of causation of health and disease. But everything affects everything. Ruh, jism, nafs, everything affects everything. But to understand this is so important, right? That there's a type of, emanation downward and inward and then outward. Downward and then outward, rather, sorry. Like, for example, the Hakims talk about the way the ruh connects with the body is that it comes through into the heart. The ruh accesses the body, the jism, through the heart, and then it disperses through the whole body and materializes and kind of crystallizes into the organs. So there's certain quwwat or faculties that align with different organs in the body. So the liver, it's not just a liver of cleansing the blood and detoxification and phase 1, phase 2, pathways and so forth. It's not just that. It is that, and it's also a place of an emotion, which we'll get to, and a place of faculty, a cognitive faculty that's attached to that. And same with the kidneys, and same with the lungs, and same with the brain, and the heart, of course. And all of these organs have a subtle reality to them as well as a material outward reality to them. Yeah? And these different kinds of energies in the organs and the jism affect the way that we are. They affect our personality. Our uniqueness comes from that dimension. So for example, the heart, the organ of the heart, right? This is the organ that gives connection to one's true self and connection to the environment and one another. The organ is the organ of relationship. The heart. The heart is the organ of relationship, right? قَلْبُ الْعَبْدِ عَرْشُ الرَّحْمَنِ. That's the main relationship. The heart of the slave is the throne of the merciful. Right? That's that main connection point. But it's also a place of connection to every other creation. Every creation, along with the Creator. It's a place of joy, of love, of spontaneity. And when disbalanced, one's stability in the world becomes compromised. Like you feel disconnected and out of tune with everything around you and with God. And there's a type of inappropriateness that can come out of this, almost a childishness, an immaturity, a lack of safety and stability. And so coming back into the heart is huge. And this is what the affair of deen is all about. And the affair of good medicine is really all about. It's coming back to the heart. Why? Because again, inna fil jasadi mudgha. Verily in the body there is a piece of flesh. If it is sound, the whole body is sound. If it is corrupt, the whole body is corrupt. Ala wa hiya al-qalb. It is the heart. In the embodied jism. Inna fil jasadi. It's in the jasad, in the jism, in the body. And you can see, even in TCM and Chinese medicine, you have this thing called Shen. And Shen comes out from the heart, and it opens up into the eyes. You know how they say, the eyes are the windows of the soul. You see this shen, this light of intelligence. And you see this in children, like that sparkle in the eye. The sparkle in the eye. You see that, right? And you see that when things get difficult for that child and there's a type of disconnection, you feel something happen. And that luster in the eye disappears. You can see it. It's actually quite heartbreaking for them and for the one that can witness that and realize that. There's something that changes for all of us. And there is something of a heartbreak for all of us in this world. We're in dunya, we're in separation from Allah. And Allah tests us. And we disconnect from ourselves. This is trauma, but this is dunya. This is not something that we have to war against. This is a reality. We want to heal. We want to become stronger. Not live in a bubble, a sanitized bubble that's trauma-free in the safe zone or whatever. There's no safety in dunya in that way. We can create safety in our societies and our families, and we should. Safety is a very important part of healing. I named my firstborn Amina because of that. I love this concept of safety, of aman. Iman and aman are related. I named my second-born Halima because Hilm is also very important in healing as well. But this is, this idea that the world, we have to protect ourselves from it, whatever. No, we seek refuge in Allah, and we become strong and connected. And when you're in that state, you're almost not unaffected, but you're unmovable. You're grounded. And that affects, and that in this today's day and age is an asset beyond assets. If you can maintain your identity, how many people now are losing their sense of identity? They don't know who they are. Changing identities every day to try to figure it out. They don't get it. It's already here. Who you are is already here, imprinted. Your heart, your fitrah knows who you are. Allah knows who you are. There's a couplet of Imam Ali. داؤك منك ولا تبصر ودواؤك فيك ولا تشعر وفيك انطواء العالم تحسب نفسك أنك جرم صغير وفيك انطواء العالم الأكبر. It says, your disease is within you, but you don't see it. And your healing, your disease is from you, and you don't see it. And your healing, your shifa, dawa'uka, fika, is within you, but you don't feel it. وَلَا تَشْعُرُ. You consider yourself to be this insignificant thing, and within you lies unfolded the greater world. But it's that first couplet. دَعُكَ مِنْكَ وَلَا تُبْصِرُ. Your disease is within you. وَدَوَاؤُكَ فِيكَ وَلَا تَشْعُرُ. And your healing is within you, but you don't feel it. You need to feel to get access to it again. Back to the body. The language of feeling is everywhere in our tradition. Presence, feeling, connection. Even salah. What is salah? As-sila, a connection. We connect with Allah Ta'ala. That's the language of deen. It's the language of life. Especially for mammals, for animals. If you want to be a good Muslim, you have to be a good human being. If you want to be a good human being, you have to be a good animal. Animals have needs. We have to honor that. We have to work with that. We can't bypass that. That is vital. And a human being needs to eat like a human being, he needs to drink like a human being, and sleep and exercise and love and have purpose and worship like a human being. Or they won't be well. I don't care what kind of medicine you have. Some magic pill, some magic herb, some magic whatever. If you don't line up that person with their hearts and their bodies in every zone of being, inshallah, as much as possible, with the fitrah, with what is appropriate for that human being, they will not be well. It's like da. Hakim has these da hikmas. These da hikmas, these things that he says, it's like da. He's like, if you want to eat well, if you want to be well, you have to eat well and drink well and sleep well. It's like, we all know that. But what's in the way? What's in the way? May Allah give us tawfiq, inshallah ta'ala, to learn what's in the way and be able to have the courage courage, which comes from the liver, which is what I'm about to get to. The courage to make those changes. So liver is connected to willpower. Right? This is how the Hakims frame it. And it's also connected with the emotion of anger and frustration. This, if you remember yesterday, I don't think I mentioned the humors. I was trying to keep it really simple, but the humor are these energetic realities that link with the 4 elements out there. So there's 4 elements out there, there's 4 humors within us, and they're connected. So the humor of summer, of fire, is bile, and bile is something that resides in the liver, helps break down the fats and stuff like that. But it's when balanced, you find courage. This virtue of courage emerges when the liver is upright. Courage, there's optimism. There's himma, again, will. When will is online and there's a groundedness with the will, there's resolve, there's himma. There's a capacity to move forward with a type of, not fervor, maybe fervor, or type of determination, will. One of the great gifts of Allah Ta'ala for us is free will, that we can choose. And one of the things that we lose, and we could talk more about this inshallah, but so many things that we lose when we disconnect from ourselves is we lose our will, we lose our agency, our capacity to choose. And we have to have that, even though we know in reality Allah is the one that chooses everything, and He's the one that does everything. He's the doer, He's the causer, He's the chooser, He's the willer. And yet, we still have to choose. And we're judged for that choice. So we have to know and be informed and have that capacity to make a good decision. We can't just leave it to Allah. No, Allah wants you to choose. And inevitably, if you don't choose, you're making a choice anyways. That's the reality. Right? By not making a choice, by being passive, you end up making a choice. And so, come into your agency. Learn about how you work, what you need, what Allah wants from you. And move forward, inshallah ta'ala, with confidence that you've done your best, you've done your due diligence, you're sincere, you've prayed istikhara, you've learned, you've applied, and let Allah do the rest. But He just wants you to move, He wants you to act. And that liver, this function here, when this is stagnated, when there's liver problems, or now in our world, when there's mass toxicity in the food, in the water, in the air, the radiation from all these devices. I mean, we don't even know what this stuff is doing to us. Honestly, we don't know what it's doing to us. People spoke about 5G and all this stuff, and people laughed about it, but the fact is, people are having annual conferences, worldwide conferences with PhDs and physicians and researchers all over the world since 2G and 3G, and they were concerned. That's fact. You can look it up. They have their conferences on YouTube. They're concerned, and they have rigorous studies and evidence, but it's just not hitting the mainstream. The corporate world doesn't want to, get rid of these things, and maybe we don't want to get rid of these things. Astaghfirullah. Right? But we don't know the implications of what the world, the technologically advanced world, is doing to our humanity. We have chronic rates of infertility, of autism, of chronic diseases of all sorts, autoimmune disease, cancer, cardiovascular disease. Everything is just increasing. It's not like, modern medicine's been able to help us kind of taper off a little bit. No, it's just like this. Everything's like this. Or for you guys, like that, right? It's not working. We've moved away from the fitrah. And the liver gets stagnated with all this toxemia because it's the liver of detoxification, of cleansing of the blood. So when there's stagnation here, we have repressed anger, we have toxicity in the body, and I see this a lot. And just, doing good counseling, but also giving some herbs and some homeopathics that can help move the energy here. It's so important. It becomes like a life changer for that person. The person feels like they can breathe. Oh, I've been carrying that for so long. The body carries so much. Right? The definition of a toxin is actually really important here too. because it expands beyond just chemical toxins, which was kind of what I'm talking about more so than anything else, but it goes beyond that. A toxin is anything that you cannot assimilate or eliminate, period. A toxin is anything that you do not assimilate, metabolize, break down, and integrate, or eliminate, take out as waste. If something's in limbo and just stuck in the body and not moving, that stagnation is disease. And it will have symptoms on your body, and because of the body-mind-ruh connection, it will affect all those levels, inevitably. I see it all the time, and those of you who are physicians or healthcare practitioners know this. You know this. So we want to be able to explore and know all these different things, and it's a lot, and I don't mean here to flood all of you with this information. I've been trying to be gentle, if you haven't noticed the past couple of days, just easing into it, because it's a lot, it's heavy stuff, but we have to know, and take our time with it, even if it's taken me 10 plus years to get to this point, and I'm still in process, I'm still in progress, I'm still developing, I'm still practicing more, still learning about myself, still improving. We have the kidneys. The kidneys regulate body fluids. The core emotion of the kidneys is fear, concerning the will to survive, right? The kidneys and Hikma, and Unani Hikma and TCM Hikma, you have these adrenal glands, these glands that sit on top of the kidneys. They were all included in the kidneys. Now we kind of differentiate them as one's an endocrine hormone gland and one's an actual organ. But in holistic medicine, it's actually one thing. And the adrenal glands, if you're familiar with adrenal glands, adrenal fatigue, it's the organ that secretes hormones, stress hormones predominantly, but other hormones as well. But mainly stress hormones that regulate the fight-flight response, which is really interesting, right? So there's this will to survive, and there's fear as a core emotion. And then the main physiological mechanism, if you will, or process of kidney function is fight-flight. What's fight-flight? There's a threat, there's something scary, there's something threatening. And the body adapts to that by creating a state in the body that prepares it for action, either to fight that thing, to oppose it, to engage with it directly, or to flee. Both are adaptive, both are important. We have to have access to both of those, right? And this can also use and tap into liver function, because the anger is a part that can also engage here, right? The anger, the will, the himma, right? So it's all connected, but it's the fight-flight response, the will to survive, the fear that can bring out the kidney function most. And what's interesting is the virtue of the kidneys is wisdom, is hikmah actually. Hikmah. Because now, when you're not looking at what's imminently affecting you or threatening you, you're able to look forward. You're not stuck in what's going to happen, and you're in this tense and, vigilant, hyper-vigilant state, looking around you and can't even think about tomorrow. Because I might not survive right now. And maybe that state you're getting at the workplace, or maybe in your home. May Allah make our homes safe places, inshallah ta'ala, where we can slip out of fight-flight into a place of rest and digest, which is the opposite, the parasympathetic state of connection, of bonding. But when you're able to regulate this kidney function and the faculties around it, you're able to drop into a state of wisdom where you can now begin to reflect on yourself and look forward to something in the future and have a more universal perspective beyond just the imminent moment and me, and my survival, which is fine because you need to do that to take care of yourself. But if you're stuck there, you have to work on that and be able to move beyond that to take in a more universal, multiplex perspective on life. What this really is all about. You're not meant to be here in fear with your tail between your legs for 70 years and then you go back to Allah. That's not a way to live. That's not what Allah wants. Allah wants you to thrive. He wants you to be well and strong. He wants you to be strong. المؤمن القوي خير وأحب إلى الله من المؤمن الضعيف وفي كل خير. That the strong believer is better, and more beloved to Allah than the weak believer. But there's good in both, because they're both people of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, people of Iman, alhamdulillah. But there's degrees here, and strength is important to Allah. And we're made to be strong. These are potentials that we carry that we're made to access and develop. And these virtues, as we begin to heal these different parts of us, we get the virtue of courage. I know we're talking about virtues on this retreat. The 4 cardinal virtues are what? Shaja'a, courage, hikmah, wisdom, hilm, clemency, and finally, its pinnacle, adal, justice, balance, pure balance. So you have hikmah in the kidneys. And I don't want to reduce it to the kidneys, right? But these are just metaphors that we can use to help understand these dynamics that are operating within us. They have realities inside of us. They're not abstract. Tamam. The small intestine, this one's very interesting, right? The small intestine is connected with the will to think, the capacity to think. In Chinese medicine, it's spleen. But it's our rationality. The small intestine is linked with our rationality, meaning our capacity to digest and absorb our food is connected with our capacity to digest and make sense of the world out there, your life experiences. You can make sense of them. And the faculty that helps you do that is the small intestine, which is the first organ after the stomach. The stomach is this really hot furnace of heat and acid. It's very, acidic and all of this. And then it breaks down the food. It breaks down food from its gross forms into its nutrients, its macronutrients, the macronutrients, the fats and the carbs and the proteins and all of that. And then it goes through this little sphincter called the pyloric sphincter into the small intestine. And there it's absorbed into the blood, right? All those nutrients are taken from the gut lining, the internal gut organ, into the blood, where then it builds the blood and circulates around the body for all the tissues and organs to drink from what they need for their function and structure. The blood is the river of life, and we have to be able to bring all these nutrients from the food through the gut into the blood. But if we're having inflammatory foods, for example, a standard American diet, which is very highly inflammatory, using bad oils, using a lot of sugar, right, using processed means of increasing supply, but sacrificing quality, what we end up doing is inflaming our gut, disrupting the gut lining, disrupting the microbiome, which is this little ecosystem of bacteria and fungi and microorganisms that help us digest food. They help us create markers for immune function. They make some vitamins like B vitamins. This is an incredible thing that we have inside of us that works synergistically with us, symbiotically with us. We actually need it. And people are now talking about the gut-brain connection. They're talking about the microbiome specifically and the brain connection. And this is why every ancient peoples had fermented foods intuitively. They didn't know about the microbiome, but they knew if we have fermented foods, sauerkraut and kimchi and kombucha and pickled foods in general, kefirs and yogurts and stuff like that, that it makes us stronger. They just knew that. In every culture, if you study the works of Weston Price, you were all around the world, studying people's diets and lifestyles. I really encourage people to read his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. Weston Price, he was a dentist, traveled all over the world, and he studied people before the modern era reached them, with its McDonald's and its Levi jeans and its television and Snickers and all of that. He studied people in the Swiss Alps. He studied people who were, living in the Arctic Circle as Eskimos and having, blubber, and fish and fermented caviar, basically, fish eggs. He studied people in Papua New Guinea, people in Oceania, like Australia and New Zealand. He went to Africa. He went all over. And he studied their diets and their lifestyles and how they procured their nutrition, how they exercised, their relationships. He took pictures of them as a community. He counted their cavities. He was a dentist. And took pictures of their smiles and their bone structure. So he did this amazing study, right? He went back 30 years later after the incursion of the monoculture, basically. The monoculture and its food and its lifestyle. And he went to the exact same places and found a totally different reality. In 1 generation, 1.5 generations, 30 years. Drastic changes in health, in the number of cavities, in bone structure. In the pictures, and you can see these pictures. When he first went, everyone had straight teeth. Everyone just had beautiful, broad jaws, cheekbones, and other teeth just came down and came up. Just perfect jaws. In 1 generation, from malnutrition and toxemia, from these foods that are processed and toxic and inflammatory, the jaws shrunk. The teeth were coming in crooked. There was more cavities. The pictures of the kids that he took were not smiling anymore. In the first picture, they're like, these kids, you see them now sometimes in these pictures in areas that are not developed, more fitri, happy, smiling, you saw pictures like that. And then when he went back, they're all depressed and like not putting their hands around their friends. And you just see like a shift, right? In the psyche as well as in the body. From 1.5 generations of eating this food. What about us? And that was like, he went back in the 60s. He went in the 30s and the 60s. So what about 60 years later? How are we now? I mean, we're not even, astaghfirullah. We ask Allah Ta'ala for afiyah. I mean, this is serious, and this has been very intentional, We won't get into that now, but maybe we can. Maybe we should, but I won't for now. But this is very intentional. They want to weaken the human being. Because the way you control people is you weaken them and you separate them. Right? Reductionism is a function of control and domination. So you reduce people from one another, you reduce them from themselves, you reduce their health, you make them contingent and dependent on certain types of medicines and care and support. You strip them from agency, you strip them from health, strip them from that connectivity that gives them that sense of purpose and belonging that is so deep. And all that is like the foundation of a relationship with Allah that's true and easy and free-flowing. So I have a few more organs, but I'm going to keep going, inshallah, because I'm actually at 5 minutes. Oh my goodness. So ultimately, you are what you eat. And this is something that you find even like Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah in his Tibb al-Nabawi mentions. You are what you eat. This is not a new thing. We've known this for a long time. And the health of our organs depends on what we eat and how we are taking care of our bodies. Bad food, inflammatory foods, toxicity, long work days, unprocessed emotions disturb our physiology directly. The body-mind connection and the gut-brain connection, science is now kind of catching up to this old hikmah we've already understood for thousands of years. Like we had to literally redevelop the wheel, recreate the wheel again. It's like beating a dead horse, or beating your head against the wall. It's like, come on, can we just move forward and give people access now to this reality and these resources? But this is what makes room now. Us talking about these things now, setting up what it means to have a fitri lifestyle. We cannot be good humans. We cannot be good Muslims if we're not first good humans. And we can't be good humans if we're not good animals. And animals have that need to eat good food, to move, to love. So when we talk about living the sunnah, not talking about this legalistic mode of being. This what's the hukm here? What's the hukm there? What does Allah want here? Is it hadith sahih or is it da'if or is it? It's not like that, right? It's a lifestyle. It's not legal. It's a lifestyle. It's an art of being. It's a way of being in the world. And this is a revolutionary thing today. We were talking about yesterday upstairs in the interactive session. It's a revolutionary thing to practice the sunnah, to be pro-fitrah, in a time that's totally inverting the fitrah. It's a great act of rebellion against the monoculture, to be healthy, to be strong, to be connected. Sheikh Yahya was saying yesterday how it's impressive for people. Like, it's impressive to see a healthy, emotionally regulated and connected, strong, munawwar, spiritual man and woman. Like, it's just impressive because no other system, no other tradition is creating people like that, really. I mean, I meet people in my field all the time, like my peers and stuff, who are really healthy, but they're talking about the goddess and talking about, going into Burning Man and doing whatever. It's like, oh my God. Like, and then you find people that are really spiritual, not taking care of themselves at all, and riddled with chronic disease. It's like, why can't we be both? Like, that's ihsan. Inna Allah kataba al-ihsan ala kulli shay. This is a part of ihsan. I really believe that. I really believe this is part of ihsan. Ihsan is not just sitting quietly, on your prayer mat, burning oud, having your nice prayer beads, having your miswak, having the band that keeps your, I forgot what it's called, the habad, right? It's not that. It's that too, but also it's like making sure your posture is good, and making sure that maybe you have some water next to you and you're hydrated, and making sure that you're feeling strong and you're stretching beforehand and afterhand, and like, it's all of it. It's all of it. We have to name it now more, because in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was just the default state, right? The default people that lived in that time were very close to fitrah. Ibn Khaldun in his Muqaddimah says the people that are closest to fitrah are the Bedouins. Not necessarily the Arab Bedouins, but for sure the Arab Bedouins are included. But any type of nomadic people that are free, that are living in nature, that travel, that are not governed, that are not suppressed by government forces and mandated by this and that to do this and that, because that breaks the will of the human heart, the human psyche. He talks about that. Bad governments that break the psyche of the human beings. Ibn Khaldun is amazing. And he said that people that are closest to fitrah are most closest to birr, to righteousness. Right? The people that are closest to fitrah, in their humanity, in their humanness, in their insaniyah, in their bashariyah, are closest to birr. It's goodness, piety, righteousness. It's connected. That's one of perhaps the secrets of why Allah chose the Meccan Qurayshi Bedouin Arab to be the recipients of the last message, of the last prophet, of the last book, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a secret to that. Allah. Okay. Becoming aware of time. I want to respect time. Do we have time for a couple questions? Maybe like 2 questions real quick, and then we'll pause for tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. Yes, Ahmad. Yeah. It's a good question. Did you guys hear the question? So he was saying, how do you reconcile between you talking about connection with yourself, and how the mashayikh scholars talk about disconnecting from dunya when you're in the prayer, not being in dunya. I wouldn't say that connecting to yourself is dunya. Right? I wouldn't say that this is what we're bringing to Allah. This is part of that connection. This is not falling outside of the circle of importance here. Like, dunya is everything outside of us that pulls us away from God. Right? Now, if you're connected to yourself and you're bringing it to Allah, by definition, it's connected to Allah. So it's good, it's sound. Right? remember, man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu. Whoever knows themselves, knows their Lord. There's a connection between the self and the Rabb. We want to connect back. It's not about connecting to a frivolous thing inside of us. I want more money. I'm going to bring my wanting more money to Allah or something. It's not, that's dunya. But it's the state of angst about, I can't pay my bills this month, and I'm worried, Ya Allah. My family's not going to have food, and I know you're taking care of us, and I have total trust in that, but I can't help my state. This is how I'm feeling, and I'm bringing it to you. You see how different that is? That different? Does that feel different? Exactly. You're not talking about the bill. It's not the specific concern in the outward. It's your state. It's your hal. That's what's most important. You bring the hal in, not the dunyawi matter. That can come in a dua after, if you like. But when you're going into the prayer, I really bring yourself to the prayer. I mean, it's just kind of obvious, right? Common sense. Bring yourself to the prayer. You're not supposed to escape yourself. If Allah gives you that kind of state in the prayer, tamam. But you can't just sit there and artificially engineer that state. No, bring your presence to the state. Bring hudur. Right? And then if Allah wants to give you something else and take you away from yourself for a moment, marhaban. Tamam. One more question, yep.
You mentioned the morality of TCM, Chinese medicine.
Yep.
And then you also mentioned about when a child suppresses themselves from being told because of correct treatment by their parents. There's a Western concept of inner child, reparenting inner child. I feel sometimes I'm suspicious of because it's missing the God centricity.
Because of what, sorry?
It's missing the God centricity, although
Yes, exactly.
reparenting inner child being in the past.
Yes.
When we approach all of these seemingly foreign modalities, there is benefit in them, I'm
Mhm.
sure. But for lay people like ourselves, how do we navigate taking from these Western or Eastern traditions that are not necessarily familiar to us as Muslims?
Good question. Did you guys hear that question? So she's talking about how we talked about in TCM and about the rupturing of the child from themselves, the fragmentation of the child from themselves because of, relationship strife or the parents doing something or whatever. The child, and then now there's talk about inner child work and healing the inner child within from that time and so forth. But she was saying that feels a little bit foreign and alien to us because where is God in that? Where is Allah in that? And how do we reconcile these things? So, amazing question. And this is what we've been talking about at the Cambridge Muslim College. We're developing a Islamic psychology program. Well, we developed it, but we're talking about how to scale it and publish more about these types of questions, how we can merge these things together in a way that's authentic to our tradition, but also operationalizing this tradition of al-hikmatu dallatul mu'min, that the hikmah is the lost property of the believer, and wherever he or she finds it, he or she has more right to it. So how do we stay open? Allah may have given something to other people. That's totally possible, and I think that's likely. We observe that. He's given a lot of things to good people, a lot of good things to people. How do we take that and integrate it and leave aside, maybe any kufr or anything that isn't necessarily in line with our sharia and our metaphysics and so forth. So this is going to take work. I mean, this is what is a group of people now actively doing to frame what is Islamic healing. What makes Islamic healing Islamic? Well, it's going back to Allah. It's recognizing Allah, right? But then as you establish that principle, you can bring in all these modalities, right? Now, I have a personal kind of gripe with inner child work because it tends to be regressive. People, they tell you, go back into the memory of you, when your so-and-so did such and such, and what was that emotion, and feel it and go and embody it and do it. And it's regressive, right? So the work that I do is actually, it's similar in the sense that we go back, but we go back to how those patterns are playing out in the present moment, right? So we're working on reflecting adult consciousness, what we call adult consciousness in the present moment. We don't want to regress to child consciousness. That's a backwards movement. But the reality is, a lot of those childhood patterns are alive and active within us today. So we don't have to go back. It's already here. So whatever happened to you, and then you adapted, and so you adapted, and then years have passed, and here you are, and if you haven't done anything active to renegotiate those patterns inside, you're probably still operating through them in some capacity, and those need to be healed and processed and renegotiated in a healthy way. You guys follow? That's really important. So we don't want to regress backwards, because that is backwards. We want to be able to move forward. I called my clinic Forward to Health. We want to move forward, but moving forward necessitates us to be able to work with the present moment and what's coming up now. And those patterns are here and now. As the somatic psychology authors, talk about, the body keeps the score, and so on and so forth. So whatever happened is here now. So you don't have to go back. And that's why somatic work isn't so interested so much in going back to the story and the narrative and re-dramatizing and reliving that thing necessarily. But those patterns that are there, those maladaptive patterns, are here now, probably showing up in your relationship with your loved ones and with Allah and your ibadah and whatever, your own habits and addictions and fixations and obsessions. And so you work on that. That's what I work. Now, if at some point in the process we go back to tell the story, because it's important, I let my people do that. But I don't go back and stuck there and we play it out and I bring out, objects and let's dramatize it together. I don't do that. I find that regressive. And that's part of, I think, an Islamic perspective, is recognizing that we don't want to move backwards. It's about tarbiyah and tazkiyah and development. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. He is successful, or she is successful who cultivates it. We don't want to go backwards. وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. He's ruined who destroys it. So we want to move forward. And if forward means we drop into the present moment and recognize the patterns to be able to do that, meaning we're looking at the obstacles to moving forward, tamam. But we don't want to go backwards too much because we can get lost there. And you can actually re-traumatize yourself, and this is common. People go back into the trauma, wounds and stuff like that, and then they end up actually just aggravating their conditions. Right? This is inappropriate. Right? So, hope that's helpful, inshallah ta'ala. We're out of time for today. I'm happy to answer anything right now, inshallah ta'ala. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين